Hello, folks. Thank you all for joining me today. This is the Real Life Real Estate Investing Show where we talk about real life real estate situations, but we bring you real life real estate solutions. I'm your host, Glenn Glasper, affectionately known as Mr. Dollar Out of a Dime. And our guest today is none other than the man, the myth, the legend himself, Mr. Mark Dolfini. Mark is going to be sharing some great information with us today. Mark is a veteran of the U.S. Marines. And thank you, Mark, for your service. Mark is the author of 3 real estate books, most notably The Judge, A Landlord's Tale, released in the summer of 2018. His much anticipated third book, The Time Wealthy Investor 2.0, was recently released in January 2019. Which teaches the exclusive VIP method of how to create a real estate business focused on life output. That sounds very interesting. I got to get that. It became the #1 Amazon bestseller in March of the same year. Mark received a Bachelor of Science in Accounting at Purdue University and worked for Marriott before venturing out full time in the world of real estate investing. He is the owner and the managing broker of a property management company based out of Lafayette, where he oversees combined ownership and management of $40 million in real estate assets. Definitely someone you want to hear from. Mark is also the founder of Landlord Coach, a real estate investor training company. He also sits on numerous boards, including the Better Business Bureau of Central Indiana, the National Federation of Independent Businesses, and is a training director for the Central Indiana BNI franchise, a networking organization. Mark spends his free time pistol shooting, watch out for this guy, kayaking, and lives in Lafayette, Indiana, where he and his wife, Jennifer, are raising their 2 sons, Leland and Logan. I want to make sure I get that right. So without further ado, I'm going to bring on my guest, Mr. Mark Dolfini. I had the opportunity of meeting Mark some time ago on a show with Roger Blankenship and was fascinated by the information that he shared, and I had to have him come on the show. So Mark, listen, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for being a part of the show, and I know you're going to be sharing some awesome information with us today. So before I continue to ramble on, I want to give you an opportunity to tell the folks a little bit more about yourself than I, of course, know. And just tell us about the things that you're going to be sharing with us today.
Yeah, well, that intro, man, I'm thinking I gotta rewrite that. It makes me sound like I can turn water into wine or something like that.
You're close enough.
No, it's that's pretty much said it. I mean, I would love to say that my journey from the beginning to where I'm at right now has been a straight slope up. And that is absolutely not what that is like. It was kind of like a short slope up and then a crash and then another kind of slope up and then a downward spiral and then, all those sorts of things. But, there's kind of like, you like your plan and then God's plan, they don't actually look the same. But yeah, so I've learned an awful lot from my failures. And that's really what people are going to hear today is the things that I've done and the things that I've screwed up royally, and hopefully they can learn a lot from my mistakes, and not repeat them for sure.
Absolutely. So, Mark, I want to talk about the Landlord Coach. You gave us some great information on Roger's show when we were talking, and we talked about quite a few different things that are happening in the market. Tell us a little bit more about the Landlord Coach.
Oh, sure. Well, really, this is a culmination of just again, all the mistakes that I've made from the beginning, from the very, very beginning, even before I got started in real estate. But also, it's really about just something that I just naturally love to do. I'm a natural teacher. And I hate using this word influencer because now it's thrown around as something else. But I believe that being an influencer is about taking someone to a better state of themselves. Mm-hmm. Influencing is not persuasion. Persuasion is taking someone where you want them to go. Influence is taking someone where they should naturally go. Absolutely. And that's why the title of coach really fits well with me, because I feel like I'm a natural coach. I'm a natural teacher. And this is just something that if I did all day, even if I did it for free, I would love it. But the fact that I get paid for it too is just super, super cool. Because I get to work with some really, really good, amazing people that want to do some really cool, amazing things in the world. And it's not just about money. Yeah, money is a byproduct, but they want to go out and they really want to impact the world in a very positive way. So being able to be part of that is just, it's just such a true blessing.
Definitely, definitely. So and this is the thing I find that I have to warn many of my guests that come on. Usually, when you have great lines like you just used, I'd be the first to tell you I'm going to steal it from you. The first time you get credit, the second time,
Right.
the first time you get credit, the second time it belongs to me.
Sure. I won't be looking for the mailbox, my 5-cent royalty,
Right.
in the mailbox. Yeah, that's fine.
But you said something great. You made a great distinction of, being an influencer and a persuader. I think, those of us that do what we do, and we get to a certain point where we do it well, and there's no shame in saying that, where we do it well. And because of how well we do with it, we share that with others. And again, like you said, it's a natural progression that we become influencers. Most times, guys like you and I, we probably have fought something like that for the longest, but realizing we do share some great information and people are influenced by that information. So I think we can check the box of influencer and be okay with it.
Yeah. When it was starting to get thrown around, like, oh, I'm a social influencer, I want to do this thing, and there are some people who really do have a really good message, whether they have a good story or whether whatever. But I just think it's lost its real attraction from when I first kind of self-prescribed me or self-described myself that way. But it was just one of those things where I felt like it was just one of my superpowers, just taking people from where they are to where they feel like they should naturally go. But the problem is a lot of people, they don't know where they naturally should go. And it's not easy. It's not easy to say, well, what am I good at? And you're so good at it that you don't see it. You don't see that as a skill. You just kind of go, well, doesn't everybody have that ability? Right. No, that's why, you have that ability. So, once I realized that people, that was just something that I just felt that I was naturally good at. And other people have told me that I was naturally good at. And I was like, come on, everybody's good at that. And then they're like, no, you've got something there. And that's where I had to really open my heart to that is a possibility. So anyway.
Wow. Great stuff. I am curious, and maybe a few of our viewers are curious. In the introduction, someone said that was a great intro. In the introduction, I mentioned that you're a U.S. Marine veteran. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious to know, how do you go from a U.S. Marine veteran in your story to now becoming a real estate investor? How did you get started in real estate investing?
Yeah, it's actually funny because I think about it. I purchased my first piece of real estate while I was still in the Marines. I had it was 50 acres of land down in Arizona. Wow. And this particular area of land was hard to buy. It was hard to buy land in that particular area, but they were parceling it out, and it was like $200 a month to make this payment for like $17,000 worth of land. And I was thinking, man, this is kind of a bargain, like that. You're not going to ever buy land that cheap. And it really was kind of in the middle of nowhere. But that's really where I started on my journey. Well, it was interesting because most people who are not in the Marine Corps think of the Marines as this hard, structured, non-malleable, entity. And it's not that. I mean, at least that wasn't my experience, and every part of the Marine Corps that I was in really wasn't that experience. I mean, there is definitely structure, and there's definitely things that you need to show up when you're supposed to show up and things like that. But being an entrepreneur was just always something that was very attractive to me, just because it was the nature of growing up in my family. My father was a self-made man. He had an 8th grade education, but built a multi-million-dollar trucking business. Wow. Basically from scratch. And he had 5 or 6 terminals, all throughout the state of New York. And so that was in my blood from early on. So us kids, we grew up painting fences and mowing lawns and stuff like that. And I just became interested in real estate just because I loved the flexibility in it. I loved I just loved the thought of ownership. And that's really what attracted me. Even though I was in the Marine Corps, it still attracted me as an entrepreneur. That's, I did my 4 years. I'm very proud of it. But it was, I knew at the end of it, my whole plan was to get out and get an education and move on to something else, something that was my own.
Wow. 50 acres in Arizona. Do you still own that, or did you sell it, or?
No, I sold it a while ago. I think when I sold it, I think I got about, I think it was close to 500 an acre when I sold it. And I held on to it for about 10 years. But now I don't even know what the prices of it there, or I'm sure they're through the roof. But the thing that was interesting to me was really more about it's great to have land. It's great to have, property. But if it's not producing anything for you, it's just costing you. And that's even though the taxes were incredibly low, it was like $200 a year. It wasn't doing anything for me. I mean, it was appreciating. So I wanted to use that equity that I had built and to get it into something else. So that's what I did. I ended up selling it and moving that over into residential real estate.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Good stuff. Yeah, 50 acres. That's quite a bit to own. I mean, and to be able to see it appreciate and sell it, per acre. I imagine that probably whomever's gotten it maybe is doing some developing or something like that with it.
Well, this particular spot of land, so I'm going to try to think of this. If it's the area of Seligman, Arizona, it's the northern part up, as you're coming out of Las Vegas and coming over that way. So it's the northern part of Arizona. And this spot of land literally had nothing. I mean, there's very little infrastructure, very little development. There was no electricity, no power lines, like there was nothing. But it was funny because my dad, he had, I think, 80 acres. He had 2 parcels that were put together, and he had 80 acres. And he had this house that basically he built up there. And if I blindfolded you, took you there, and you woke up in this bedroom, you would not know you were literally in the middle of nowhere. I mean, he had satellite television, and he had a generator, and he had a solar panel system, and this big gray water system. I mean, you could take showers. You would not know. You'd walk out and go, "Oh my God, I'm literally in the middle of nowhere." So it's super cool to have that bit of land, but he had a rock wall built all the way around and that sort of thing. But it was he had developed, he developed his own lot, but there was, I mean, most of the people who have that stuff up there, they're campers or they're hunters, or, they just like to go and write their manifesto or do whatever they do.
Okay.
Grow a beard, that sort of thing. So
I was gonna ask, what attracted you to that area, being in the middle of nowhere? I mean, I guess it was because your dad had purchased land there as well.
Yeah, my brother had, my dad had, and they were saying, "Hey, there's some land up there. Do you want to buy it?" And mine was adjacent to some federal land, so I was like, "That's fine. That works for me." So I ended up buying it, and then like I said, I just held on to it for a while, just watched the price go up, and see what other people were buying it for and that sort of thing. But yeah, it was a good investment, but for me, if I was going to buy land again. I would want it because I lived in Indiana. I went to school in Indiana, so it really wasn't like where I could even get use of it. So, for me, it was just truly just speculative. Would not recommend anybody take that approach because, again, I mean, for me, because the holding costs were so incredibly low, it made sense for me to do that. But on the other side, it just it made no sense for. I would not recommend someone do that now because you can get chewed up in holding costs really easily if you're not careful. So
got it.
Yeah.
So this is what started your investment journey. Kind of tell us how you transitioned throughout the process of to where you are now. I know it's probably a long time. So how long have you been investing? I guess I'll ask that question.
So I was 24. So that was like 200 years ago when I first bought that. No, so it was over 20 years ago when I bought that. And then when I got out of the Marine Corps, I came to Purdue University in West Lafayette, Indiana. There's Lafayette and West Lafayette. I lived in Lafayette. And I started buying rental properties while I was in school And, so I was 24 years old, fresh out of the Marine Corps, and I wanted to buy rental properties. So I started buying rental properties while I was in school. And I had some money set aside, but I was really good at figuring out how to buy properties with no money down. Most of those programs are no longer existent. I can't find any of the banks that would still loan me 100% loan to value on stuff. But
right.
But I figured out, like, it was kind of going in and saying, like, hey, I want to buy a house. And they're like, okay, well, like, show me this. I'm like, well, what do you need? What do you need to see? Like kind of, what's the hand I need to play here? So I got into with some good mortgage brokers at the time. They would kind of tell me, the things that they were looking for, front end ratios, back end ratios, and things like that. So once I figured out, specifically what it was that they were looking for, then I started realizing that it wasn't that hard for me to get into properties with no money down. That doesn't mean I should have bought them. That's the thing. Just because you can get into a deal with no money down does not automatically by default make it a good deal. So that's why I say, like, my journey about how I coach people now started even before I started investing, because even back then it was OPM, use other people's money, all this other crap. And honestly, I'm not saying using other people's money is a bad strategy. I'm just saying in and of itself, it does not make it a good deal. So I was buying properties with no money down, getting into these properties, and I was buying these rental properties. So by the time I graduated from school, I had about a dozen rental units altogether. So it's just a little over $500,000 worth of real estate.
Wow.
So most of them were single family dwellings, and there's a few duplexes here and there. So that was really kind of where I started, and then it, of course, then it got a little bit more interesting as time went on. But as I built my real estate portfolio, I kept going. Of course, I graduated from college. I worked in the hospitality industry for a while, and I gleaned a lot from the hospitality industry, and realized that it's funny, even though, for those of you who are in the hospitality industry, you're looking at something called RevPAR, which is revenue per available room. They track things like that. They track, different rates and things like this. It was really interesting because I learned so much from the hospitality industry about it that I could apply to the real estate business. Because one of the fundamental things that I think people forget, or they just never learn, is that real estate is fundamentally a people business.
Yes.
Like, you have customers, you have clients, and they treat their customers terribly. Now, that doesn't mean that you get that these people should walk all over you either. You should have rules, and you should have standards, and you should have policies and procedures that ideally, if you're a pushover, that you don't do, right? You have someone else enforce those rules, and you just do it clinically. You don't get emotionally involved. But it's really interesting that people often forget the human component when it comes to the real estate side of things. So when it comes to the real estate business.
Absolutely. And it's very important. That's one of the things I always talk, about when I'm coaching. I tell people that the first thing we have to do is build rapport. And many times we have to be prepared to be in a position to educate the people that we're serving, especially as it relates to, the distress situation that they get in. Many of them don't know how to get out of those situations. So it's on us as the professional to, help them understand why it's necessary for us to buy a certain way, or whatever the exit strategy is, and things like that, So, right. I mean, that people component is very important.
Yeah. And to your point for what you just said, I'm amazed at how many people don't have an acquisition strategy, getting into a property. They don't have an acquisition strategy that's in alignment with their disposition strategy. What are you going to do with it? Right. So they get the house, they get the whatever, like, just use my own example, right? I bought this raw land with no idea what the hell I was going to do with it. Right. So, again, you have to have an acquisition strategy that's in alignment with your disposition strategy, because I can't tell you how many times, there's people that they'll buy properties, and then I'm saying, hey, I just got my first property. I'm like, hey man, congratulations. What are you going to do with it? Mm-hmm. Well, I'm not real sure yet. We might flip it. We might make it into an Airbnb, we might. I'm like, oh my God, stop. Stop, man. You're driving me nuts right now. You're giving me hives, because that is such a great way to lose money.
That's
It's a fantastic way to lose
yeah,
money.
yeah,
And especially with if it's their first deal, you know, they're so susceptible to so many different things and so many, not even just market forces, but just being taken advantage of. They don't
yeah,
even know.
yeah.
So if you're going into this without any sort of cohesive strategy in advance, you never, it's like, you know, when people, you know, you never send a Marine into war without knowing what outcome looks like. What does victory
Right,
look like?
right,
Right.
right.
You don't do that. You don't get into a situation like that. So that's why it's really, really important to know what your disposition strategy is before you start acquiring properties.
Good stuff. My camera has done something here. I don't know exactly. Hopefully, it'll come back here in a minute.
Okay.
Um, but that's okay. I'll.
There we go. I see you. Nope.
All right, I'm back. So I'm gonna switch. All right, here we go. Oh wait, hold on. All right, so there we are. Um, sometimes these things happen where
That's all right. No worries.
camera decides it's gonna do what it wants to do.
I get it.
So listen, great stuff. So what I want to ask, I mean, because I know you're managing, $40 million, $40 million in assets. Now, is all of your property in your local area, or are you working all over the country?
All over Indiana. So, but not in every market. There are certain markets that does not make sense for us to be in.
Mm,
So we have a good chunk of them in Lafayette. We have a good chunk of them in Indianapolis. And that number, you know, it's always evolving. It's always moving up and down. And right now it's high just because market values are so high. And I would also make the argument right now that, you know, the pricing is going parabolic, and anybody who follows the stock market, who knows when a price of anything goes parabolic, you know, it's just kind of like an airplane. You know, when it starts to go up, it only can go
yes,
up vertical for so long. So I think we're kind of getting to that point. I don't really know, you know, what it's going to look like. You know, is it going to crash? I don't think it's going to crash, but there's definitely a correction due. But I don't know what that's going to be, and I'm not really sure. I mean, right now, 2020 is just unleashing so many different things on us right now, between
right.
COVID and killer bees, and you know, and all these other things that are, I don't even know. I'm probably, the moon's going to crack in half and a giant vulture is going to come out. I have no idea, but whatever it is, I'm sure it's going to be something epic.
I think I must have slept through the episode of the Killer Bees. I keep hearing about that, but I don't know how I missed it.
Yeah, well, and well, they're coming. Like, they evidently, like, these gigantic wasps are coming from. They somehow landed here from Japan and are on the West Coast. So who knows? And
Oh,
yeah,
okay. So they're still coming. They haven't
they're
got.
coming. Yeah, just need to be patient.
We're gonna sit and wait for the Killer Bees to get here.
That's right. You got a while there in Atlanta, so yeah.
Right. Yeah, we're down at the corner a little bit, so they might take a little while to get here.
Yeah.
Great stuff. Great stuff. All right, so I want to talk about what you kind of getting a little bit more into the business of real estate. And that's always how I propose. When talking about real estate, I always talk about the business of real estate. And what you are going to share with us is the VIP method to building a real estate business and not a job. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so kind of a continuation of what my original story was when I had been buying properties, and I had about a dozen rental units, and I started working for the Marriott in St. Louis.
Mm-hmm.
I was the assistant controller at the airport Marriott right across from the airport there. Great hotel, great people, great company to work for. Marriott is just a wonderful, wonderful company to work for. But I felt like I was a bird dying in a cage. My background's in accounting, and people who know me go, "How in the world did you get through the accounting program?" And I'm like, "Man, through sheer grit," because that is not my personality at all. But it was a good background, and I was the assistant controller, so I was helping, oversee the books there. And it was a really, really good time, good a good learning experience for me to learn about how how the hospitality industry was working and how all that stuff, and also at the same time, I was still accumulating properties. So it's a really good place to be when you're still making W-2 income and you have rental properties, because a lot of that stuff gets offset because my taxes were nothing for years, and I would get a lot back. So anyway, when I was building up my rental portfolio, by the time I started, I was kind of leaning towards leaving and doing my own thing. 9/11 happened, and I was on my way to this job which I didn't hate, but I didn't love, and I was thinking like, man, I just sitting at a desk pushing paper from one side of the desk to the other, handling the same complaints over and over and over again, just was not what I wanted to do. And plus, I felt like I was building someone else's business. I wasn't building mine. Right. So, when 9/11 happened, and I grew up in upstate New York, and those two buildings were one of my favorite landmarks to see when I would drive to the city. And all of a sudden, they were no longer, ever was I going to see them again. And then hearing that people were jumping out of the buildings, and I was like, that's not possible. Like, why would you do that? And then I, of course, went up and, saw the images that we all saw and we've all seen multiple times. And I thought, God, I hope those people loved their jobs, because I just thought for just a second, if you were going to a job that you just didn't like and you're kissing your family goodbye, and in New York, commuting is like an hour. I don't care where you're at. It's an hour at best. Yes. And it's literally like planes, trains, and automobiles, just getting to work in one direction. And these people were never going to, that's the hustle, man. That's what they were doing. And I just thought, some of those poor people were heading to a job that was not fulfilling, just to have to go, great, now I get to jump out of this building, Wow. And that really, really resonated with me. Yeah. And I thought, I need to start taking some action in towards of moving my needle, towards the direction I wanted to go in. So it wasn't too much longer after that. I ended up leaving the Marriott and going out and doing my thing full time. So by the time I left, and I had built up my rental portfolio through this hodgepodge of creative financing and wheeling and dealing, I had 92 rental units at my peak, back before the Jerry Maguire moment in 2008. So I built this up, and the real fundamental problem that I had was I wasn't underwriting my properties properly. So as a result, every single individual line item that I didn't budget for properly, right? I didn't put a budget in there for advertising and leasing. I didn't put a budget in there for management. I didn't put a budget in there for repairs and maintenance. So as a result, every one of those line items that I didn't budget for was a job that I ended up creating for myself.
Wow.
Right. So, multiply that times 92. I had thousands of little jobs for myself, but, from opening the mail, answering the phone, filing evictions, doing the banking, doing all the repairs and maintenance, doing the cleaning, doing the showings. I mean, it was madness. Absolute madness. So back when all of that was going on, in 2008 came along, and I was bringing in roughly $65,000 a month in revenues. By most people's measure of success, they're looking at me going, man, this dude's crushing it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Meanwhile, my life was the living definition of hell, because I was working, 14, 15, 16 hours a day just to try to keep up with the sheer volume of work that I had.
Yes.
And then when things went sideways and my revenues went from $65,000 a month to $30,000 a month, I just couldn't keep up. I mean, but again, because I was stuck on stupid, I just kept working harder and harder and harder, and worked, 18, 19, 20, sometimes 24 hours at a stretch, just trying to keep up with this volume of work. So needless to say, it did catch up with me. Shocker, right? And I ended up getting sick, and I got double pneumonia, and I almost died in the hospital from just nearly working myself to death. So as I'm laying there in the hospital, and you're asking about the VIP method that I wrote about in the book, The Time Wealthy Investor 2.0.
Mhm.
The VIP method is really about creating a business for yourself and not a job. Because what I had done, the reason I had left corporate America is because I was working for basically an unreasonable boss. Now I had a good manager. I had some good people that I worked for, but ultimately at the end of the day, I had this unreasonable boss that always wanted me to show up and always wanted me to do this stuff, right? Whatever it was.
Yeah.
And it turned out, I mean, don't get me wrong, the Marriott was a wonderful company, but I swapped one really miserable boss for a lunatic boss, and that lunatic was me,
Yes.
right? I never got to take time off. I never got to go on vacation. I could never not go anywhere with this stupid thing.
Yeah.
And if I did, I would break out in hives, like, oh my God, where's my phone? And it was almost like a badge of honor that I would like, oh, look at me doing the hustle,
Oh, yes.
And how familiar does that sound, right? With these
Yeah,
people.
I can definitely relate to it.
Yeah. And I'm not judging anybody that's doing that. It's more of a confession than a judgment, right? Because I was there doing that same thing, flexing the hustle muscle. Well,
Yeah.
it was that almost killed me though. And I don't say that in any short way. So there I am laying in this hospital bed with all these tubes in my arms, and and I got thinking about all the things that were basically wrong with what I was, with my life, my business, and everything else. And fast forward a little bit, I was able to put things in 3 different buckets. And this is where I want your listeners to really pay close attention, because this is really where things really started to change for me. First, all my processes were here. They were all in my head. Everything that I knew, whether it was the name of the residence, I mean, I had files and stuff like that, but all of it was basically in here.
Mm-hmm.
None of it was systematized. And even if it was systematized, I have all these people saying, you need to hire somebody. Well, what in the world am I going to do? Hire them, walk them into a room and yell, do work, and then run away? Like, it's all in my head. Like, I had no processes to speak of, right? So because it was all in my head, it was all incredibly inconsistent.
Mm-hmm.
And, any good business, I don't care if you like it or hate it, any good business that has consistency down, they have a business.
Right.
They're operating. So consistency really needs to be the product more than anything. So that was the first and foremost, is I didn't have any actual processes. Everything was just reaction based, right? Secondly, even if I did have processes, I didn't have any infrastructure with which to run them on. Like I was kidding before about if I hired somebody, what am I going to do? Walk them into a room? Well, I didn't even have a room. Like I didn't have a desk, because I operated all out of my truck. I had a truck and a laptop stand, and a police, you'd see in a police cruiser.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I had a printer that sat in the back seat. Like, I was like, look at me in my little fancy office. It was absolute lunacy. So I had no infrastructure. And because I had no infrastructure, I didn't even if I had processes, I didn't have anything for that process to run on. So what's infrastructure? Desks, chairs, software, website, things like that basically are the bones of the business, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
In addition to that, the part of the infrastructure is the asset class selection. So the asset class selection is, like it's the actual types of properties that you want to buy. Is it single family dwellings? Is it multifamily? Is it parking garages? Is it, self-storage units? Whatever that is, it's the asset class selection itself. So because I was buying low-end single-family dwellings, right? Some duplexes, but mostly single-family dwellings.
Mm-hmm.
I was buying assets that needed such a high degree of maintenance that it was attracting residents that needed a very high degree of management.
Wow.
Okay. So let me say that again for emphasis.
I wanted to make sure you give a little perspective, because some people may not get how that correlates.
Right. So I was buying these low end, we all know what we're talking about, right?
Yes.
On the edge of the war zone, right?
So they look like anything, so anybody can move in.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And I was hung up on, man, look at the rate of return on this.
Yes.
Right? But you don't pay bills with rate of return. You pay it with cash. You pay it with
Absolutely.
dollars. Right?
Absolutely.
But you get so hung up on that rate of return on these $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 properties.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I was attracting. I was buying properties that required such a high degree of maintenance that I was attracting clientele that needed a very high degree of management.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to have this really robust infrastructure just to manage all of the nonsense. And then the nonsense came, and boy, did it come in spades.
Yes.
Right? People calling about, well, I'm moving out because she drank my milk. What are you like? I felt like I was raising someone else's adult children.
It
like,
happens, yes.
No, are you kidding me? So all this stuff was going on. So that was the infrastructure piece, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I had no systems. I had all these properties that were just really, really hard to manage, right? The final piece is I really had no clear direction on why I was doing this all in the first place.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
Why was I getting out of bed? Why was I even doing this?
Yes.
There's lots of things that I could have definitely done, and everything that I had done in my professional career, especially even in the Marines, everything I had done well,
Mm-hmm.
except this was just a complete disaster.
And you knew the purpose of what you were doing before, but this is something sounds like
I lost sight of it. I mean, if I was really clear and got real focused on why I was doing it in the first place, it wouldn't ever have devolved into buying 92 rental units, because every book I had read and about real estate was about how to buy more and why more is better and everything else. It gave me the tactic, but never the why, right? So when I talk about the VIP method in the Time Wealthy Investor 2.0, I wanted to write a book that helped identify the why, right? Mm-hmm. So VIP, what that is, it's about building a business. VIP is vision, infrastructure, and process. So it all starts with vision. It all starts with, why are you doing this in the first place? Mm-hmm. And most people say, well, I want to get 100 rental units. Well, don't confuse the number of rental units with the life output that you think that will buy you.
Wow.
Right?
Definitely, yes.
Don't think that you need 100 rental units because you want to, you think you want to drive a Bugatti and live in a house that curves with the earth.
Right.
I'm not telling you that that's wrong. I'm not telling you that's wrong, but there's going to be some things that you have to give up in order for that to be true. Absolutely. Are you willing to give up a relationship with your bride? Mm-hmm. Because you may have to say, hey, you know what? We're both two high performers. She loves to work. I love to work. Yeah, we're good, man. We're solid. Okay, I'm not telling you that's wrong. Mm-hmm. But if you want to have a really solid relationship with your children where you get to have dinner with them every single night,
yes.
That might be what you have to give up in order for you to have your Bugatti in your house that curves with the earth, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, I'm just saying, as long as you're willing, as long as you understand the price that you have to pay and you're willing to give it up, that may be it. Now, if you're not willing to pay that price, okay, then let's really start talking about what's really, really, really important to you. Mm-hmm. And what's really important. And I'm not diminishing the other stuff, because we all want to have toys, right? But what are the toys that are going to be the most important for you to have? And the most important things that you maybe you don't even want to own a Bugatti. Maybe you don't even want to own that, but maybe you just want to have access to one, right? Why do you need to own a $3 million car when you can have access to a $3 million car, right? Absolutely. I'm not a boat guy, but do I want access to a boat? Hell yeah.
Yes.
Right? I don't need to own it because I've owned, I didn't, but my family's owned boats, and boat stands for break out another 1,000. You will spend a ton of money, and if as cool as it is to say you own a boat, it's not cool to have a boat that sits in your driveway. So for whatever thing you have, whatever thing that you actually want, that's great. Where is it going to fit into your calendar where you're actually going to be able to use it? Right? True. That's what vision is all about. It's about having that white space on your calendar to go and do and experience the things that you actually want to do, to enjoy the things that you actually have. If you have this mountain cabin, that's awesome. Not awesome if you see it once a year for 3 days.
Right.
If you're going to, use it a lot, then great. But there's no point in having this stuff if you're not ever going to use it or ever get to enjoy it. So that's really what vision is about. It's about creating white space in your calendar and having access or, ownership of the things that you actually want and the people in your circle that you want in that circle, right? You want in that experience. So that's vision.
Mm-hmm.
So vision has to be super, super clear in terms of why you're doing this all in the first place. Then we build an infrastructure. And we build an infrastructure that's in alignment with that vision. So say at a very rudimentary level that you say, Glenn's like, yep, I want to lay on the beach for 2 months out of the year in Spain, rubbing cocoa butter on my belly. Okay? I'm not here to judge. I think that's an awesome vision.
I'm trying to get rid of the visual now.
And everybody else too, right? You're all
right.
But if you want to lay on the beach rubbing cocoa butter on your belly, that's going to be terrible for you if your infrastructure is set up to where you have to return emails and phone calls in a timely manner.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
As cool as it is to say that you're laying on the beach, it's not cool to work from the beach. That's terrible.
Yes.
Like unless your job is to make margaritas, like even then, no. Like I wouldn't want that, right?
Exactly.
Bring margaritas to me, right?
Yeah.
So my point is the infrastructure, the vision has to be clear because when you're building the infrastructure, when you're buying the asset class, or you're building those desks and chairs or whatever that infrastructure looks like, that business, that has to be in alignment with your vision. So you're not having to work this job and it's short circuiting your vision, right? It all has to be in alignment. So you want your vision to be super clear. So when you're building that infrastructure, that's in alignment with your vision. Finally is the processes. The processes is it's the stuff that you learn from the gurus, right? It's the stuff like how to, if you want to buy properties with no money down and you want to manage your properties in a certain way, you want to get your residents to pay rent a certain way. You want to collect biweekly rent instead of monthly rent because you want to get that extra month's rent per year. That's fine. That's all tactical stuff, right? Mm-hmm. But that's the stuff that you need to put in place at the end that runs on the infrastructure that you built, that all stays in alignment with your vision for the future. Wow. Right? Wow. So that's the long version of the story for the VIP method, but that's about creating a business for yourself and not just a landlord job.
It's amazing. It's amazing how you put it all together. I got to say, what I'm hearing is, and basically how you just described the vision and all that, I'm hearing a lot of excerpts from Tony Robbins' book, Money Master the Game, where he talks about where, so many people want to go out and buy these things and have ownership of them and having to pay the maintenance costs. When you talked about the boat, break out another 1,000. That's one I'm going to steal from you as well. where as opposed to having the access, where the maintenance costs and when you're having to pay for a boat being docked on the lake and things like that, as opposed to doing that, you have access to those things because there's always going to be boats there. Yeah. And those people that have them there are smart enough to know that they're not going to be on the boat every single day unless they're living on it. Yep. Then they can rent it out for a day when you decide, or a day or two, and you decide that you want to go, or the Bugatti or the.
Yep.
So I mean, we have Airbnb. We can own a mansion for a week now.
Yeah. Exactly. And that's really where, when we get really clear about what it is that we want. I mean, and I love Tony Robbins stuff. I mean, I wouldn't say I'm a disciple, but I definitely, I follow him with the 6 human needs and stuff like that. And my coach, because again, even though I say, I used to say that not everybody needs a coach, right? Mm-hmm. Like you don't really need a coach. I was wrong. I think everybody does. I'm not saying I'm the coach for everybody because I'm definitely not everybody's cup of tea, but my coach had introduced me to kind of that. And I had already kind of had that thought, but even though I wasn't ever voicing it like that, but he was making a point about, having access to a boat where, he could, have all these friends and come on. And he's like, dude, I don't want to own a boat. I want to go to a place where I can have this boat for 3 days. It's already stocked. It's already there. And guess what? When everybody else leaves, I leave with them and someone else cleans it up.
Yes.
Like that to me is awesome. And I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah. He's like, because to spend a week in advance to go down there and get it all stocked and get it, I mean, that's not fun for me. That would be terrible. and then of course you're going to feel like you forgot something, whatever. But, that's why I think, what's this all about? What's the experience that you actually want? And a lot of people want to travel. A lot of people, and I'll tell you, let's just take it out of the realm of physical material things for just a second. It's rarely the exception when I'm talking to somebody that, or rarely is it the time rather, that I'm talking to somebody that wants to get into the real estate world and real estate investing, and we talk about the Ferraris and the stuff that they want, but they want something more in their world. They want to be able to have the ability to send their kids to school, or to dig wells in Kenya, or to do something related to some sort of philanthropic stuff. So that's where I feel that there's a lot of people who are wanting to spend their time having access, having the free time to go and do some missionary type work, to go, maybe they want to run for, alderman, maybe they want to run for a local office, or maybe they want to run for Congress, whatever it is, because they want to change their world. That's really important for them, so but you've got to have white space on your calendar in order to be able to do that.
Right. Great stuff. And then, and I'm looking, and again, I'm listening to things that you're talking about and putting in perspective of having a business that runs itself as opposed to a job, is basically how you're describing it. And, I know for me, that's been the idea that I've had for some time now, because, everybody's, like you said, flexing the hustle muscle, but you get to a certain point where you've been doing the same thing, as far as, being in real estate. I've been in for a number of years and doing the same thing over and over again. And then it clicks like, wait a minute, what I've always been doing has worked in terms of making money, but have I really gotten the time back that I really want to get in doing what I'm doing? So that's what it's put in perspective for me, to be able to have systems in place so that I don't have to constantly work. I still constantly work, but it's not on the things that I know that somebody else is capable of doing and handling for me. So that's great stuff. Yeah.
And to that point, I know a lot of people out there, especially if they're self-managing landlords and they're doing this thing, if you've got a job that you're doing, let's say for argument's sake, you're cleaning an apartment, okay, and it takes you a couple hours to do, all right, and then you stop and think, okay, well, what would it have cost you to hire a cleaner to do that job, right? Mm-hmm. I have no idea, right? But if that job, if you could pay someone else to do that job $12, $15, $20 an hour, mm-hmm. that's what you're paying yourself when you do that job.
Yes.
And I hope to God nobody out there is looking to get into the real estate business to create a $12 or $15 or $20 an hour job for themselves.
Absolutely.
Because you should be thinking more along the lines of, $100, $200, $300, $500 an hour is how you should need to start valuing your time.
Definitely.
Because when you are doing that work, that's what you're paying yourself. Mm-hmm. When you're doing a job that you can pay someone else, to do $12 or $15 an hour, when you're doing that work, that's what you're paying yourself. And you wonder why you're broke. You wonder why you have time famine. You wonder why you don't have any money and you don't have any time to do anything. So that's the reason. And that's what I was doing. Again, not judging, confessing, right? This is what I was doing, right? So I just want to make sure that you understand that. Now, to a point, you're like, well, great, I want to hire everything out. But if you didn't underwrite it right up front, and I'll be honest with you, some of the valuations that I see on properties right now don't make sense because, the pricing is way too high, to make it work without leverage. Of course, if you've got leverage, and that's, of course, that's a different topic, but you can make this work, but you've got to budget each individual line item for this stuff to happen, because if you don't budget for it, it's either you paying for it or you doing it. And that's the way, and that money has to come from somewhere else.
And see, that's the thing. I try to describe these things to my wife, when she gives me this honey-do list, and I say, I don't have time to do these things. Because
Oh
the time
man,
it takes to do those things, somebody else could be doing them for what it costs per hour to do that.
I feel like I'm going to be getting a phone call.
Probably. Yeah.
What have you told my husband? Honey, I can't mow the lawn. It's costing
Right.
us money.
And
Yeah,
listen, and see, yeah, and I don't mow the lawn because somebody else does that. I don't. Yeah, it's costing too much money for me to be out mowing the lawn.
exactly. Yeah, come on, honey. I'm saving us money right now. That's
Exactly. Right.
That's right.
So now we dare not get you on as the landlord guy, and have you talk about how to put things into cost perspective. Tell us how you evaluate a property. So you're managing $40 million in assets. What does that look like, and how does one that wants to get to that point learn how to evaluate properties? I mean, can you give us some perspective from start to end on how somebody can get involved in something like that and how they can get to the level that you are?
Sure. Well, first of all, I would tell you don't need to be at this level, and the reason that we are is again because we manage a good portion of that. So what I'm saying is that the management side is really about you don't need that number. You don't need 250 or however many we've got at this point, but you don't need that number. And the reason I don't know is because I've got people that are really good at their job that handle that.
That's
right.
great. That's great.
That's the thing. And when I look back, if I had stopped at 20 or 30 units, I mean, most people who are listening to this show, if you had 25 or 30 units that paid you $1,500 a month free cash flow, I don't think you'd be upset.
Not at all.
I don't think you'd be that upset, right? So, bringing in $45,000 a month in free cash flow, I don't think you'd be that upset about that. But that said, most people, and again, there's when you're analyzing the properties the right way, again, it's just making sure that you're thinking this through. You're thinking this through in terms of, what are all the basics, and there's stuff that you can go to. You can go to my website. There's some download stuff there that you can find it. But it's just a simple landlording, or a cash flow analysis is a simple cash flow analysis where, how many times have I seen people budget for late fees? You don't budget for late fees.
Right.
Late fees is like gravy at my mom's house at Thanksgiving. It's great if you get some, but don't count on it.
Absolutely.
Right? Never makes enough. So what I'm saying is the individual line items, just things you shouldn't budget for. And there's definitely things that you should be budgeting for. Like, how many times do I see people that budget, they're going through their analysis and they put 10% on there for vacancy. They don't even know why.
Right.
Why not 12? Why not 40? Why, what are you doing by putting 10% on vacancy? Vacancy is a measurement of time. So you mean to tell me that you can go from $0 to vacancy to turn the unit back to dollars again, where you've got money coming back in 1.2 months? That's 10%, right?
Right.
Which, if that's reasonable, then that's fine. But don't just throw 10% in there if you don't know, reasonably how you're gonna do it. When I was managing the properties by myself, I would literally have someone moving out the back door. I'm painting in the middle, and I had someone moving in the front door, right? I could manage the properties that close. It was not hard to do, especially with single-family dwellings. People loved those properties. So to analyze those properties the right way, you've got to make sure that you're budgeting for each of those individual line items. What are you doing for leasing expense? What are you doing for, again, if you don't budget for it, then either you're doing it or you're paying it out of pocket. What are you doing for leasing expense? Do you have someone else showing the properties for you, or are you doing that? What are you doing for repairs and maintenance? Most people do not budget enough for repairs and maintenance. Capital expenditures. Most people don't even understand what CapEx is. CapEx is the actual replacement of high ticket value items that you can mathematically figure out what it's going to cost you. Yes. If you've got a 25-year roof and you've got 5 years left, or 5 years into the roof, you've got 20 years left on that roof. Divide that 20 years by the amount that roof would roughly cost to replace. And now you've got a budgeted item that's based on an actual dollar amount instead of just 5%, you're putting $33 a month towards the replacement of that roof in the next 20 years.
Wow.
Right? That you can put in an account. And the biggest problem that most people run into when they're managing properties is the spikes in cash flow. They can't handle it. They can't handle hey, I had great 6 months and all of a sudden I had to replace a furnace or a water heater. It wiped everything out.
Yeah.
Well, if you're analyzing it properly, those spikes in cash flow pretty much go away.
Wow. Because you're already budgeting for those types of things.
That's right. And it's coming out. And again, let's say for argument's sake that you budgeted, let's say you budget for vacancy on an annual basis, which is for most single family dwellings, that's pretty aggressive. Most people like to stay a little bit longer. If they're not staying that long, then you definitely need to look at you.
Right.
It's a you problem, because most people don't like to move and move that much.
Mm-hmm.
But generally, if they're moving, or again, you're in a game that's not worth winning, right, because of your asset class selection. Mm-hmm. But if you've got people that are going to live there and you've budgeted for people to move out at the end of 1 year, then if they're staying a second or third or fourth year, then that second, third, and fourth year, that's gravy. That goes to your bottom line. That's profit. So you've done a good job, right? So that's what I'm saying. Like, you can then start to enjoy these if you're managing them well. You're managing your vacancy well, and your cash flow is a lot better as a result.
Great stuff. Mark, listen, you've given us some awesome nuggets to chew on. And I know there's some people that are watching that are paying attention, but I know these are things that I'm definitely going to be taking notes for myself. Aside from the lines that I'm going to steal from you, I am taking notes on myself as well.
I'm going to have to put a hashtag on these things so I know whenever.
Right. Would I use them?
That's right. That's awesome. Well,
Great.
Really great to share this stuff. I am super passionate about this stuff. Honestly, if this became illegal, I'd have to become a criminal, because I'm not really sure that I'm good at anything else. But systems and this is the stuff that I just love to do. I love to teach, and I could talk about this stuff all day. So thanks so much.
Great stuff. So let's talk about the time wealthy investor 2.0.
Sure.
Now, how can people get your books and how? And I know you mentioned your website, and you said that they can go to your website to download some things. Can you give us a little bit more of that information, and we'll have someone post it here for us so they can obtain those items?
Sure, it's available on Amazon. That's probably the fastest way for you to get it. I was doing a free plus shipping offer with my book, for a while. I'm not doing that right now just because I was doing the fulfillment. And again, I was creating a job for myself that I didn't want to do. But if you do want to buy it from me and you want me to sign it, we can certainly work something out. Just reach out to me on Facebook. I'm at my logo looks like this. So it's facebook.com/my landlord coach. Of course, you could see what I'm about also at landlordcoach.com. But those are you've been great.
In the yard now.
Oh, okay. But you could find me either at landlordcoach.com or like I said, at Facebook at my landlord coach, or even at landlord coach on Instagram.
Great. So now, in your other book, I think we talked about the VIP method. Mm-hmm. And then we talked about the other book. So all of them are on Amazon as well. The Judge, A Landlord's Tale.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that book.
That book was actually never meant to be a book. It was really, I love to write. That writing is just definitely one of my passions. Mm-hmm. But without giving too much away, it's a book you could read on a flight or a long bathroom session, I suppose. But it was really meant to be a book that I just gave away when I was doing speaking engagements and things like this. And I do a fair amount of that, pre-COVID, I was doing a lot of that. But so it was easier for me to travel. So it was a thinner book. And the Time Wealthy Investor, it's almost 300 pages. So It's a beefy, it's not a walk through the park sort of book, but I've gotten some very, very good feedback, and all of it positive. It's in alignment with the VIP method that I talked about earlier. The Judge, on the other hand, is really, it's written as a fable. So what I will say without spoiling too much is there is a guy who's there doing the hustle. Okay. He's doing the real estate hustle, and he's got a job, and he's out doing what I refer to as undertime. Okay. Undertime is when you're kind of stealing time from your employer to handle your own stuff. We all do it. Okay. Well, we all did it. Now I work for myself. So I'm stealing time for myself, I guess.
Yeah, I steal time for myself too. So.
Exactly. But it's when your resident calls you and says, I have a dryer that doesn't, or a water heater that doesn't, whatever
Yeah,
it stopped doing. And so you step out of the meeting, you step away from your desk, or you handle your personal business there at your job. Well, that's this guy, the main character in The Judge. So one time he steps away from a meeting and he comes back in, and he gets to meet the judge, and the judge was a former eviction judge in a southern court. Okay. He soon realizes that this judge is not of this world, and he was recently sent to a higher court. So the judge then explains to him that he's going to be visited by 3 other people that day. So he basically gets visited by the ghosts of tenants past, future, and present.
Wow.
I had
don't give too much away, because that sounds like an interesting read.
It's a lot of fun. I really enjoyed writing the book, and there's some really good lessons in there. Everybody who's written it thought it was a great book. But that The Judge is you can get that on Amazon as well. But yeah, I really enjoyed writing that one. So. Got
it. And so you have a program. It's that they can find on landlordcoach.com. Is that the program that you have?
Yeah. So if you're interested in now, I do have a higher level coaching program, which honestly, if that's something you're interested in, you can drop me an email, mark@landlordcoach.com, and we'll have a conversation. So I don't just put that up. Like, you cannot sign up for that without us talking, because not everybody's a good fit, right? Like, we may not jive, or you may have unrealistic expectations in terms of what coaching's about, because it's really more about you than it is about me.
Absolutely.
I know I'm good at what I do, but like I said, I'm just not a good fit for everybody. So what I would, the course though is about becoming a VIP in the rental business. And the VIP, of course, is not very important person. We all want to be VIPs, but this is about the vision, infrastructure, process, method that I talked about. So become a VIP in the rental business. You can find more information on there. You go to thelandlordcoach.com. There's a members area, and you can see there's a link in there that will tell you all about the course. But again, if you got specific questions about the course, you can welcome to drop me an email. Again, that's mark@landlordcoach.com.
Okay, great stuff. Okay, now you said there's the high level. So is there like a lower level coaching program that they can maybe purchase to go through before they get to that point, or
No, that's a good question. Not at this time. And the reason was I was trying to do kind of like a group coaching thing or that sort of thing. And that's just not a good fit for me. And the reason being is because I really like to get to know people really, really well. Yes. In fact, I just had a student try to call me. And I know, like, he's going through some stuff right now, and he's actually, he's probably mad at me. I don't care. I don't care that he's mad at me. You're not hiring a friend. You're hiring a coach. And sometimes I'm going to make you pissed at me.
Yes.
And I don't,
yes.
I'm not worried about that.
Yes.
My job is to get you to a better place to where you're at now. He's probably mad because I challenged him on some stuff yesterday, and he might be cooled off enough to actually talk to me. But the thing is, I'm not making him mad for the sake of making him mad. I'm making him mad because he was doing things that were not in alignment with his vision. He was doing things that were not in alignment, and I challenged him on it. And I'm not there to be his buddy. And I can tell you many coaches that I got pissed at over the years, both athletic coaches and other coaches. I don't want a coach that agrees and thinks that everything I do is amazing.
Absolutely.
And that's right.
You're making a great point. I mean, is there a great, so we'll use the athlete for I mean, or we'll say something about a drill sergeant, you're being in the military. Is there a person that has become great at what they do that has never got pissed at their coach? I'm sure Michael Jordan's gotten upset with his coach, and LeBron has gotten upset with his coach. Yep. And being in the military, you've gotten pissed at that drill sergeant that has yelled at you but it's gotten those things out of you that you didn't probably recognize you had in you.
Yeah.
You know? So, I mean,
Yeah.
I think being a coach that gets pissed at that people get pissed at is par for the course.
Yeah. And I had all my feelings removed in the Marine Corps. So I'm
Right.
But my drill instructor, I mean, one of my drill instructors, I towered over him. He was just 5 feet tall. He was meaner than a hornet, but he made us better,
Yeah.
and he because he cared about us. He cared about us as Marines.
Mhm.
My wrestling coach, another guy. I mean, he was a disaster in his personal life, but as a wrestling coach, he was fantastic, and he
Right.
made us all better. In fact, I think about half the team ended up joining the Marine Corps after we graduated, but we were all super tight. We all knew what our job was, and we all knew what it was about, what the expectation was. So it was it's good to have that for somebody who's really not going to be too worried about you being upset with them, or their feelings getting hurt, that sort of thing. So yep.
And and that's the thing that I think most people that hire coaches, they don't understand a lot what goes into being coached, right? First, they know they want somebody to tell them what to do, but when you tell them what to do, they don't always want to do what you tell them what to do, what
Right.
you tell them to do.
Yeah.
And then sometimes, those of us that are coaches, we have to be able to release them to do things that we know that they are capable of doing. And oftentimes,
Right.
in my experience, it hasn't quite worked out well, because when you release them to do what you know they are capable of doing, they don't always do it. and then it becomes your fault.
Well, and you can't push a rope, and you can't want it more than they do.
Absolutely.
Like that's why vision is so incredibly important, and that's generally the biggest part where people struggle the most is their vision. They're afraid about committing to one or two things because they're going to lose out on something else. That's why real estate is so great, because there's so many different opportunities. There's literally a million ways to make $1 million in this business.
Absolutely.
But they're afraid of, like, well, if I do that, then I'm going to miss this opportunity over here. And I'm like, man, get one down, get it right, get it running, and then move on to something else. That doesn't mean you have to stay on that thing forever, but get it running, get it right. And, or even just one piece of their vision. It's like, it's a vision is an evolution. It's like, well, you learn how to crawl, and then you learn how to walk. Yes. And then eventually you learn how to run. Then you learn how to ride a bike. And then you learn how to ride a motorcycle or drive a car, like whatever. There's always this evolution, in terms of us always wanting more, because we got a piece of that vision, or we got a taste of that vision.
Right.
And then only to find out, like, what, that's not really what I want, That's why I know I don't want to own a boat. I've seen that. I know what that looks like. I'm like, I don't want any of that,
Yeah.
Meanwhile, everybody's all happy, they're backing the boat into the water, and everybody's going, they're happy, woohoo, look at me, okay. And then everybody's just like miserable at the end when they're driving the boat in, and this guy's yelling at this other guy because they're trying to crank the boat in. I'm like, oh my God, I don't want any of that. Like, I just want to be able to drive the boat up and go, here's the keys,
Right.
God almighty, hell no. But that's what I'm saying. Like, you learn that as an evolution, and just in terms of getting closer to pieces of your vision.
Yes. That was one of the things I always thought I wanted to do. I always thought I wanted to own a boat. Which I'm still going to buy a boat. I'm still going to buy a boat. But the idea that I'm going to have, just like you mentioned, like you talked about earlier, is the exit strategy. The idea that I'm going to have behind buying a boat is I'm going to buy it with the intention in front of me to rent it out to other people. And I'll use it when I'm ready for it.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, which some people do for vacation rentals and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it's which is not bad. Not a bad thought. You can own a vacation rental in an area that you want to visit, that you want to be in, and then go when you want to go. I don't think that's bad. But just understand, it may be costing you, like, especially if you want to go during prime weekends when most people are wanting to go and use that property. There may be a cost for that, but just understand. I mean, it's not a bad strategy. I mean, I know there's a lot of people teaching that.
Definitely.
So,
Mark, listen, we're on our time, but you have given us some great things to think about. You've given us some great information. I want to give you an opportunity to share with the folks again how to reach out to you,
Sure.
and how to go and find your book on Amazon. If you can just give us a little bit of that information before we wrap up, I'd greatly appreciate
Yeah,
it.
sure. It's the Time Wealthy Investor 2.0. There's the original version of the book, The Time Wealthy Investor, which I wrote back in 20, let's see, I think that published in 2017. You can skip that book. It's not a progression. It's actually the 2.0 version is the better version, so you can skip the first book. It's available on Audible or anything like that. If you do decide that you do want the course, I'll give you the book. The book is included. I would send you a copy of the book, the physical book, if you do want to go to the course, becoming a VIP in the rental business. It's a lot. There is a ton of content in there, and you also get to be part of the private members group, the private members area, where you can ask questions, and it's really, really important to me that the course is everything that you're going to need, all the tools in your toolbox that you're going to need. Even if you don't want a coach, or you're not ready for a coach, you're not ready to be held accountable. I get that. That takes a little bit. That's it's an investment in not only money but time. But if you want to do that, that's you can get the book either that way, or you can get it through Amazon, the Time Wealthy Investor 2.0. But you can reach out to me. My email address is mark@landlordcoach.com. That's I will tell you right now, I'm not great at email on purpose because I don't want to be. I don't have to be.
Right.
Well, and you know this because you were just like sending me things. Email. I'm like, dude, I'm terrible at it. And then it was finally on Messenger when you finally like, dude, I need to.
Right.
But also you can find the information at landlordcoach.com. Facebook at My Landlord Coach, or also, of course, on Instagram at landlord_coach.
Great stuff. Great stuff. Mark, thank you again for joining us today. Thank you for sharing your wealth of knowledge. And we'll make sure, we send the information for people to be able to reach out to you, when we actually put this back on again. So thanks again. Thank you for those of you that joined us today. And again, this is the Real Life Real Estate Investing Show, where we talk about real life real estate situations and we bring you real life real estate solutions. Thank you for watching, and look forward to seeing you all real soon.